Gabriel Burkhardt joins me here again in the News 13 digital studio for another investigation, a behind-the-scenes investigation conversation, I should say, about your latest investigation. Gabby, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so this segment, as I like to just sort of prime people, if you've never seen one of these before, it's kind of an investigative conversation. It's a behind-the-story conversation that we have with our investigative reporters about the work that they do, the processes that they took in putting together some of their stories, because we know, Gabby, you work a long time alongside Ann and Larry Barker, working sometimes for many weeks to put these stories together. So this was one of them that you just recently put together. This is related to unlicensed contractors, and I know, again, an example of something you worked on for several weeks. How did you come about this one? What was the story you were trying to tell here, and why?
Well, so I had a producer, Sarah Montoya. I'll give her a shout out real quick here. She was helping me for a little while, filter through stories and court filings. And this was one of the things that she noticed started popping up in court filings was unlicensed contractor complaints. Right. But then that got us thinking a step further. I think a lot of people were just from being home more during the pandemic, working from home more, we're tackling a lot of those home improvement projects. So whether that be, getting work done in a laundry room area or a portion of their house that they maybe hadn't taken the time before to do, home construction projects were up, I think, as a result of just people being home more. And so there were several factors, taking, again, that a step further, that I reached out to regulation and licensing, and we can get into that, but there's sort of the regulatory authority surrounding licensed contractors in our state here in New Mexico. So just asking them questions. Can you give me data? How big of a problem is this? And it went from there.
I see. So, yeah, along that line of how you went about approaching this story, what were the processes you took as a reporter to kind of obtain information and interviews? Is it court records? I mean, how did you get the data to put the story together and the interviews?
A lot of it is court records because working without a license in the state of New Mexico as a journeyman or a contractor doing gas line work, you have to have a certain state license for that. And if you do not, and if you're found to be practicing without those licenses, you can face criminal charges. So in this case, they're misdemeanor charges, but they pop up, when you're just searching through court records, like some of us reporters do from time to time, just looking what kind of court cases have been filed lately. So I just started searching those, contracting without a license, complaints in our online court records system, which, the general public also can have access to, but just started compiling those types of cases, asking and working with the state's regulation and licensing department, has an arm under RLD called Construction Industries. And I actually knew of them through one of our editors who edited this piece, actually, Tommy Garcia, was one of those, victims we talk about, got work done in his home, ended up having a whole mess of problems he had to get fixed, had to then learn, there is this authority you can complain to when this happens to you as a consumer called Construction Industries, and they have a team of investigators who will investigate your case, and if needed, file charges against the journeyman or contractor who's doing this work without licenses. So there is sort of a process that you can go through if something goes wrong, but a lot of times people don't know that they can file a complaint with Construction Industries or don't know what recourse, if any, there is when you're faced with a problem like this. So I just felt like this was something maybe a lot of people could relate to.
This is krqe.com/investigations. That's where you can go to find investigations like this one, more behind the story segments, and other stories of Gabby Ann, and you can find a link to Larry Barker's stories in there. So anyway, as I was saying, you do share a bit of a personal story in there. This is a man named David Dotson, had upgrades to his bathroom. There he is right there in the video here. This cost him a lot of money, and I wanted to just get that basic figure in there. How much did it cost him to get all the work done that he wanted to do? And how much should he have paid had none of this problem stuff sort of happened?
Yeah, so this happened, again, like a lot of people, he was just trying to do a couple of home improvement projects on the bathroom so that he could sell this house and move. I found him through a court filing. He had filed a lawsuit, so there his name was and contact information. So he reached out. Yeah, he said, sure, I'll talk. So he just needed a new hot water heater. That's the old one. It's, the city wouldn't even take it back to recycle because it was just so old. But anyway, so he gets in contact with this contractor who was recommended to him and, paid a few $1,000s initially to get a tankless water heater installed.
Right there,
then it comes to find out, well, the gas line wasn't installed properly. That's the new one.
Yeah.
Then he, basically it's just like a snowball, right? Like if you get this, it'll probably work. Well, maybe you need a new meter. Well, maybe you need this. So in the end, Dotson tells me he paid a little over $15,000 to do what should have been probably a $4,000 job, just because it had to be done twice. Old stuff had to be removed, and basically a new company had to come in and just start all over with new equipment.
Wow. And you mentioned the contractor that did the work in this story. You did reach out to him. Did he ever get back to you? I know there's a video shot of you trying to text message. Did he ever send maybe an initial message to you and say that he was going to talk to you or anything like that?
Well, so I have his number, of course, from these customers who had been in contact with him, and they all had kind of a similar story to share about him as well, which is that when they started asking or complaining about some of the work done, asking for refunds, those types of things, that he would basically end up ghosting them, like just stop responding. Well, for me, when I called him, he did answer. Okay. I know it's a mobile number because he sent me a text message. After he answered, we sort of like got cut off. And then I got a text message on my phone saying, sorry, I have bad service. What's this about? So then I did. Yeah, you saw me. My photographer was filming me, texting him, just saying who I am, what station I'm with, this is the story, I'd like to talk to you, I did not hear back.
The contractor who did the work in here, again, he's one of just numerous people who has faced allegations related to this unlicensed contract work. So I did want to ask you, I think the answer to this is probably yes, but are there others out there?
Oh yeah, many more, because we know, at least from the state, that they have hundreds of complaints, open investigations into cases just like this. And those are just the ones that get reported, right? Like, I'm sure there are a lot of people maybe who, like we talked about, don't know that there is recourse out there, or maybe they just don't have confidence in the system, like, well, if I report it, what's going to happen? I know a lot of people feel the same way, when they're reporting, like, other issues. So yes, there are others. And I wanted to point out too, I learned from Construction Industries who told me, it's not just that these people are contracting without a license. That's, one violation of the law that could create problems for you as a consumer and also for them. But as RLD, or Construction Industries, told me, it's also really dangerous if they're not licensed to do gas line work, for instance, in a water heater installment. If something goes wrong, the gentleman we interviewed, who's the director for Construction Industries, who's also been involved in some of these investigations and gone to sites where things have been done improperly. There he is, Clay Bailey. He told me, they had a situation where a man and his children died from carbon monoxide poisoning as the result of an improperly installed water heater. So like he said, people can do this, wrong themselves. There are things that can go wrong, but that's why the sort of education in gas line work and the requirements to get those licenses are something that you have to have if you're going to do this type of work in New Mexico.
Yeah. Well, I got a couple of questions for you that I feel like they're related, so maybe I'll just kind of combine them here. But were you able to find out any sort of numbers or data to suggest just how prevalent this problem is? It sounds like Construction Industries there has some level. You mentioned how many open cases there are, but that's just the number of open cases. So I guess the question be, is there any kind of predictive number about just, well, we may have this many open cases, but we think there are this many more. Any numbers like that, or are they just not sort of at that point where they've measured something?
I don't know that they gave me an estimation for how many they think there are out there, like some sort of multiplier that they use. I'm not sure about that. But Construction Industries did tell me that, pre-pandemic, they would average about 275 to 400 cases a year. And then when I asked about this originally, they had upwards of 800 open cases and only 6 investigators at the time of this interview for the entire state of New Mexico.
Wow.
Now, some municipalities have ways of investigating these types of cases as well, but as far as like the state, arm of Construction Industries, each investigator has dozens of these cases on their plate.
Yeah, and could they use help? I'm imagining they probably said yes, but much like every industry these days, hiring people has gotten a little tough.
I think, yes, like pretty much every industry that we have interviewed as of late, I think they say, yeah, we could always use more help.
What are some of the tips you tell people if they are looking to hire a contractor?
Well, this is something that Clay Bailey with Construction Industries really drove home to me during our interview, which is that before someone even hires somebody, you as the consumer should do homework that will ultimately protect you and your home, ideally. Number one is homeowners should always check contracting licenses before hiring someone. And you can do that on the state's website, on RLD, which is Regulation and Licensing Department. They have a website where you can literally search whether or not the person you plan to hire has a license to do what they're going to be assigned to do. Always have a signed contract. That was something else that Clay Bailey just said. If the person you're working with doesn't want to sign a contract, you probably shouldn't do it, because you need to have that on paper to protect yourself and the business who's agreeing to do the work. What are they agreeing to, and for how much? If something goes wrong, either in your home or with the work or the job, you can file a complaint with, like I said, Construction Industries or Regulation and Licensing, and they should be able to assign an investigator, hear you out. They did say, like a lot of other industries, bear with them as far as the timeline goes. Some of it does take time, but they are very active in this department. And then, I see you put a contact email up there as well, so people can always reach out.
This is the Investigation and Enforcement Division website, what it looks like. That email I got right from this. This is just related to, if you want to request an investigation, there's an easy link on there. It sounds like they ask people to fill out a form with this as well to send to that email that we punched on screen a little bit.
I will say one other thing that could be a red flag if you're looking for a contractor and you don't know somebody personal or somebody doesn't recommend. It's hard sometimes to find like good work, right? And you want obviously somebody who's reputable if they're going to invite them into your home and essentially tear up walls or do whatever they got to do with gas lines. Mr. Bailey said, if they quote way low, like way under what everybody else is quoting in the market, that could be a red flag. I mean, it's unfortunate, right? Because you're probably going to spend money doing whatever project you're out to get accomplished. But and then, with construction projects just in general being up on the uptick, some of those really good licensed contractors might have a really full schedule. So it's harder to find, good help in some cases, which is causing, it appears, a plethora of issues.
Yeah, wow. Well, Gabby, an interesting story, and it's one of those ones that is clearly prevalent. What is a good way to reach you if people have any comments, questions, or suggestions on stories?
Yeah, you can always send me whatever feedback or story ideas via email. I read all of those. Gabrielle.burkhart@krqe.com. You can reach me on Twitter @gburknm.